I get it. When we show up and we're talking to locals about, oh, we want to introduce bug farming to you. People are like, oh, great. That's not exactly high on their list. But then they actually taste them, and they taste like bacon. And so we actually call them bacon bugs. And that is, once they actually taste them, it's an effective sales component, basically.
Hey there, Podcast Aquanauts. It's your host, Casey. Here at the Tennessee Aquarium, and especially so inside the studio dive cage, we're pretty proud of the biodiversity that can be found in our backyard of southern Appalachia. But even we have to bow our heads in respectful acknowledgement of the astonishing, truly one-of-a-kind ecology of Madagascar. This island nation off the southeast coast of Africa is the world's fourth largest island behind Greenland, New Guinea, and Borneo. At 228,000 square miles, it's about 85% the size of Texas and more than 5 times larger than Tennessee. That's not only a lot of land, it also encompasses a ton of different habitats, from spiny forests and rainforests to a towering central mountain range. As a result of its separation from the mainland and this wide range of niches to be filled, Madagascar is home to a frankly incredible collection of endemic species, aka those that are found there and nowhere else on Earth. Something like 90% of its 15,000 species and counting are unique to Madagascar, including, of course, more than 100 species of lemur. In this episode, we chat with Dr. Tim Eppley, a seasoned primatologist who spends more than half his time working on the ground in Madagascar studying lemurs and other Malagasy species. He'll be visiting the aquarium on April 7th as a guest speaker for an evening celebration of Madagascar's amazing ecology and to discuss the work being done by his nonprofit, Wildlife Madagascar, to preserve it by working alongside the Malagasy people. Okay, that's enough from me though, don't you think? Let's move it. On with the podcast. Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Podcast Aquatic, the official podcast of the Tennessee Aquarium. Today, we're going to be reaching a little bit outside the bounds of the aquarium to talk to a special guest, Dr. Tim Eppley, who is a primatologist and the Chief Conservation Officer at Wildlife Madagascar, which we'll get into what exactly that organization does. But first of all, Dr. Eppley, thank you for joining us. You're going to be coming here to Chattanooga not too long from now to meet some of our members and members of the public who want to come and see you and hear from you. What are you going to be talking about? And welcome to the show.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. And I'm super excited to visit Tennessee Aquarium in a couple of weeks now, and
April 7th.
April 7th, on Tuesday. And Tuesday. And I'll be talking about Wildlife Madagascar, the organization I work for, the work that we do in Madagascar, and quite a bit about lemurs, which has been the main focus of my research over the last 20 years.
And we obviously have a lot of lemurs here at the aquarium. We have 3 different species of lemurs, so there are actually some representatives of the kinds of animals that you work with. We've got in our lemur forest exhibit red-collared brown lemurs, ring-tailed lemurs, and red-ruffed lemurs. Are any of those species with which you've worked or that you've seen out in the wilds while you're working in situ over in Madagascar?
Yeah, of course. I have actually worked with all 3 of those. I spent a little over 5 years working with red-ruffed lemurs in the Muswell Peninsula. That was back when I worked with San Diego Zoo. I have worked with the red-collared brown lemurs down in the littoral forests of southeast Madagascar. I worked with the bamboo lemurs, but I would occasionally see the collared lemurs in my days during my master's and my PhD work. And there was also a ringtail that lived in that forest. And so she was well integrated in one of my bamboo lemur groups, which was a very curious situation. But and then we're starting actually a ringtailed lemur project in the coming months. And so, yeah.
Very cool. So I did promise that we would talk a little bit about Wildlife Madagascar itself. So what is its mission and what role do you play in seeing that mission over the finish line?
Yeah, so Wildlife Madagascar is a conservation organization that collaborates closely with local communities to protect Madagascar's extraordinary biodiversity. Our mission is to reduce pressure on globally important forests and wildlife by protecting habitats and providing sustainable livelihoods and services for those surrounding communities. We work in multiple ways, so safeguarding forests and wildlife through patrolling, monitoring, and law enforcement, supporting ecotourism, so visitors can experience Madagascar's wonders, improving local and regional planning around conservation and development, and helping farmers increase food security through and income through sustainable agriculture. And we also strengthen community-based organizations, provide alternative livelihoods, and support education so children can grow up appreciating and protecting their native wildlife. We really believe that protecting wildlife and supporting people go hand in hand.
Yeah, I was going to say you're mentioning a lot of work that's done not with wildlife but with people, and I want to get into that a little bit more later on in the conversation. But to begin with, I guess the overarching question is why Madagascar? I guess what makes that place so special, both I guess culturally speaking, since you spent a lot of time there, but as well, I mean, really, I guess the focus really should be kind of on the biology. So, in terms of its biodiversity, what makes Madagascar so special? And then what about the people of Madagascar and their relationship to that biodiversity?
Yeah, so biologically, Madagascar is just extraordinary because of its incredible level of endemism, which are species that you can't find anywhere else on Earth. Compared with the regions with the most endemic families, so like plants and vertebrates, Madagascar is the top of that list. It has 21 scientific families that are unique to the island. So 5 plant families and 16 vertebrate families. And when you look at those numbers a little bit closer, you end up with, around an average of about 90% of its wildlife being endemic. So there's about 52% of Madagascar's amphibians, 99% of its reptiles, 96% of its breeding birds, 100% of its non-flying mammals.
Lemurs.
Well, lemurs and the
And others, I'm sure.
the euplurid carnivores, and there's Illuris, which are these tough-tailed rats, and tenrecs, of which there's over 30 species, which are kind of like these little hedgehog characters. So there's a lot more than just lemurs
Sure.
in Madagascar's habitats, and the bats too. Bats and freshwater fish have extremely high levels of endemism. So that combination of diversity and uniqueness makes Madagascar this living laboratory for evolution and an irreplaceable reservoir of biodiversity.
Well, and a few of the families of animals that you're talking about have other representatives here at the aquarium. So we have Madagascar hissing cockroaches, we have tenrecs in our ambassador animal collection. We've got radiated tortoises at the same event that you're going to be at. We have our reintroduction manager at the Tennessee Aquarium Conservation Institute who will be talking about the work that he does in Madagascar as the head of the Saving Animals from Extinction Radiated Tortoise Program for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And we also have panther chameleons. So it's just such an interesting place, and those animals really speak to some of the things that you're talking about with it being such a unique geographic location and an ecology. What has led to that level of endemism? Why is Madagascar home to so many species you can't find anywhere else? What led to that isolation from the rest of the world in terms of its evolution?
Well, millions of years ago, Madagascar was in the center of Gondwana land, and then it began separating from Africa.
So Gondwana land being the continental configuration prior to what we recognize as the continents as they're positioned today.
Correct. So it was the supercontinent of most of the southern continents all mushed together. And so, yeah, around 180 million years ago, Madagascar began to separate from Africa. And then about 88 million years, Madagascar separated from the subcontinent of India. And so at that point, it became tectonically isolated. And then after dinosaurs went extinct, there were probably a few million years there where not much was happening on Madagascar. And then the ancestor of lemurs, likely on a vegetation raft, arrived in Madagascar sometime between 60 to 50 million years ago. And without any predators, really, and with all of these different available habitats, they began to radiate and evolve to fill all those available ecological niches, and creating this extraordinary diversity of species that we see today. And then, later on, like I think it was 26 to 19 million years is when the Malagasy carnivores, the euplurids, showed up. And so, yeah.
What would be some common names of some euplurids, since for those of us who are listening who are maybe not scientists?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Fusa is Madagascar's largest carnivore. So they're all part of the same family. So the euplurids are basically like Madagascar's mongooses, but the largest being the Fusa. And they're I don't know what their weight is, but they kind of look like a small mountain lion, a small cougar in a way, with a very long tail. They're semi-arboreal, so they will chase the lemurs along the ground and in the trees. And then some of the other species are like the ring-tailed Bonsira. We have Malagasy civets. There's a Phalanook, which is a really bizarre, narrow-nosed carnivore with this bushy tail. We really don't know anything about it. The Euplurid carnivores, Madagascar's carnivores, have been very, little researched, and so that's one of our ideas, is to start to explore more about carnivore research beyond just the lemurs and some of the other stuff that we do with Wildlife Madagascar.
I introduced you earlier as a primatologist. That's correct, right? You are primarily focused on studying primates?
Yes, my background is mostly focused on primates. My PhD is in animal ecology, and zoology, and so I'm fascinated by all life. We do have projects on chameleons and other herpetofauna. We're conducting some bird studies now. But my personal research through my academic research has been largely focused on primates.
Can you give us a bit of background on your own path to studying lemurs and kind of falling into this line of work? What was the appeal initially of this particular group of animals, and how did you get to where you are now?
Man, yeah, I think it's kind of random. I don't know that I always wanted to work with wildlife. I knew that as a young kid. I grew up in Michigan and spent a lot of time outdoors, and all of our family trips were, focused on, family road trips to national parks, and yeah, just always keeping lists of every animal that I saw. And when I got to college, I was trying to decide. I knew I wanted to work with wildlife, but I didn't know in what way. And so I took a lot of intro classes, from, zoology to anthropology to um, fisheries and wildlife, just everything. And I ended up really loving zoology, and I followed that. And as part of that course, we had to do an internship, and I ended up at the San Antonio Zoo, and for a summer, and working with their large collection of primates. And I really fell in love with the lemurs then. And when I started to explore opportunities, there was a study abroad that was going to be going to Madagascar through my university that next year. And so I was accepted, and I went on it, and just absolutely fell in love with the country, fell in love with the wildlife, and decided that I really wanted to focus my graduate studies on lemurs, and some of these ecological questions of dietary specialization and how they survive in certain habitats. And yeah, honestly, I mean, there were probably instances where, you know, I very easily could have gone down another path and studied marsupials, or maybe studied snakes. But lemurs are just, yeah, they're super cute. And I think being in Madagascar as well kind of sealed that deal, where I just had to devote my life to working with them and working with the people there.
So you say they're super cute. So you kind of sound like you love them for the same reason that a lot of the people who come to the aquarium and see them love them, and that they are, I think, inarguably very charismatic animals.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
What are they? What are they like in the wild? I mean, do they? They are for people who are maybe not familiar with lemurs and how they live. They tend to be. They have social groups, right?
Yeah, so they are primates. Lemurs are primates. They're strepsirrhines, so they're part of this wet-nosed primate fam group, and they're diverse. So social organization can go from into certain species being solitary to having small family units to having larger multi-male, multi-female groups. And then even with the ruffed lemurs, and they could have these fission fusion groups, this social organization that's very similar to chimpanzees and spider monkeys, where you have individuals or core groups that are kind of moving around and intermixing at certain times of the day or certain times of the year. And so they're just, yeah, incredibly diverse. And yeah, as for what they're like in the wild, they're curious. If you're working with habituated animals that are used to being followed by researchers or seen by tourists, they can be, yeah, very curious and, kind of cock their head, kind of like a dog would when they look at you. And yeah, and then they're very playful. A lot, you see a lot of play behavior between subadults and adults towards directed towards juveniles and infants, and you see these very caring primate families, which are a reflection of ourselves.
So you said that part of the appeal was not only that you fell in love with lemurs, but you fell in love with the country. So what was it about Madagascar that you found so, I guess, appealing? And I mean, it's such a large country and so geographically diverse. I mean, was it the people, the landscapes? What component of life there did you that resonated with you maybe most strongly?
I think it was a combination of it. I hadn't traveled to Africa before, so it was the first African nation I'd been to, even though most Malagasy would say that they're not really part of Africa. Um, it it is just it's an incredibly diverse place. The Malagasy people themselves are, kind of this mixture of Indonesian, Malaysian, and Bantu or East African, um, uh, ethnic groups. And so there's, you know, I think 16 or 17 different ethnic groups in Madagascar that are all quite diverse with their own dialect. And they're all, incredibly friendly and just so welcoming, that, yeah, it just made it a really easy place to work. Um, and the landscapes, Madagascar is the fourth largest island in the world. So, like you said, it's a very large place and it's incredibly diverse. And so, being an island, we have all these different unique habitats. So, you have rainforests in the east, you have this kind of semi-wet deciduous forest in the north, you have dry deciduous forest in the west, you have a spiny desert in the south, and then you have the highlands that run down the central spine of Madagascar that are kind of this mixture of um, uh, you know humid deciduous and evergreen forest mixed with these savanna grasslands. And so you kind of have everything there. And it just makes it an incredible place to travel, an incredible place to visit, incredible place to work, just because of that variability all across the country. So.
You mentioned earlier that the importance of working with the people of Madagascar. So, on this show, we've talked a lot about a lot of different animals that are, for one reason or another, not doing terribly well, and lemurs are, as a group, one of those. So they're in a fairly perilous state correct? Their in terms of their impairment.
Oh, certainly. So for lemurs, obviously you have red ruffed and ringtail and red colored brown. And those are pretty common species throughout zoological collections. And I think what most people don't realize is that lemurs are incredibly diverse. There are 108 different lemur species, constituting 112 distinct taxa. And 95% of those are threatened with extinction. So, meaning that they fall within the IUCN Red List categories of being critically endangered, endangered, or vulnerable. So 30, I believe it's 33 species are listed as critically endangered. So 31% of lemurs are critically endangered, and there's a near equal number that are listed as endangered and near another that are listed as vulnerable. So I think there's only 4 or 5 that are not, or they're listed as near threatened. And so it's incredibly precarious for these species.
Well, and to tie it back to what I was saying earlier, since I left that as like kind of a hanging chad, but I mean, a lot of the reason that many animals find themselves in that state is anthropogenic. So it's because of us. It's human activity. Is the same true for lemurs? Are we responsible for the state in which they as a group find themselves?
Certainly. Yeah, many of the drivers, involve habitat loss, either degradation or fragmentation, a lot of land conversion for expanding agriculture, hunting. But yeah, that habitat loss, that's impacted also by climate change, in that, that zone within the Southwest Indian Ocean is becoming hit with higher intensity cyclones, which then, uh, cause this incredible destruction within the remaining forests and incredible destruction along those forest edges. And that in turn can also wipe out crops for those local communities that are living adjacent to those protected areas or those larger forests that are remaining. And so when their crops fail, they feel that they have no other alternative but to turn to the native forest, where they either are going to cut down trees, to rebuild homes or to sell off as lumber. They could collect other natural forest products, or they could hunt, to be able to provide protein and other nutrients to their family. And so, it's very difficult. It's definitely anthropogenic, the situation being forced on lemurs. So it's tough though. There was a famous primatologist named Alice and Jolly that used to say that Madagascar, in terms of like conservation, it's a tragedy without villains, because you can't, these are, communities that really, need to take care of themselves. And, that's when the forest is there, like they've done for hundreds and thousands of years, they need to rely on it. So coming up with alternatives for those communities and helping them out is just as important as working with the wildlife within those remaining forests.
The Tennessee Aquarium's podcast Aquatic is made possible by support from the Tennessee Conservationist, the official magazine of Tennessee state parks. Each issue is filled with fascinating stories about Tennessee's native species, rich history, and unique culture. It's also your guide to exploring state parks and planning your next outdoor adventure. Subscribe today at tnconservationist.org. So this is where we circle back to the point that we started the whole conversation at, which is talking about Wildlife Madagascar. And can you elaborate a little bit on the emphasis that your organization places on interacting with the Malagasy people and treating that as a gateway to achieving improvements for the wildlife of Madagascar.
Yeah, so people in nature are inseparable. So that partnership with the local communities is really at the heart of everything we do at Wildlife Madagascar. And it doesn't work if it's imposed from the outside. So Madagascar's people are the true stewards of their land and their wildlife, and so we really want to work hand in hand with those communities, design projects that protect biodiversity while supporting their livelihoods, like sustainable agriculture, forest restoration, ecotourism. Um, and it's really the most effective way to create that lasting impact that we want to see. And when people see those direct benefits from protecting their forests and their wildlife, that conservation becomes a shared goal rather than this external demand.
So, when you were beginning your academic career, did you anticipate that people would be a pretty huge component of the work that you're doing and the goals that you want to achieve? Did you anticipate that, or was that something that kind of came as a shock that you had to get used to during your time working there?
Yeah, no, never. I never thought of working with people. I think most people get into working with wildlife because they want to
Get
work with
away from
wildlife and
people.
they don't want to work with people.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's true in the aquarium. I know it's definitely true in zoos. um, and for me, that turning point was COVID. I had been in Madagascar in 2020 for January and February, and I remember in March when the U.S. was shutting down or they were suspending travel at the same time, Madagascar decided to self isolate, so they were going to close down travel to Madagascar, and so I made a quick move to get out. I was on one of the last planes that left the island, and in mid to late March, and thankfully my team, I was working with San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance at that time, and our project kept going, and it was really great. But the pressures on the forest at that point, because of the lack of ecotourism opportunities in some of these national parks, um, because of the lack of other opportunities from whatever services, whatever businesses, there started to be incredible pressures on these remaining protected areas. There was an uptick in hunting and deforestation, collection of things, and so it really prompted me to focus and look at how we could integrate livelihood programs and how we could focus a bit more on the human communities that are around these protected areas. And it was just as important as working with the wildlife. If we wanted to actually conserve the species that were in the forest, we were going to have to focus on those communities because they were the ones that were under this equally difficult pressure to provide for their families. And so we needed to come up with those alternatives and provide them with food security and education and all these other things. We wanted to work with them to make sure that they had that, so that we could decrease that amount of pressure in those forests.
So obviously, in the course of the work that you do, you've learned quite a bit about lemurs, I'm sure. What is the work that you've done with Wildlife Madagascar and the interface that you've had with the Malagasy people taught you about them?
Oh yeah, I mean, they're resilient. They just don't have, in these rural areas. It's just the lack of opportunity, and so they end up being so grateful for any time anyone comes to work with them and to come up with effective solutions for them. So for Wildlife Madagascar, we work. When we started out, we started with three different sites in Madagascar. So we didn't start with just a singular site, but we started with three different sites. And before we did any work in the forest or set up anything, we conducted a very comprehensive socioeconomic assessment of all of the households within a 3 kilometer buffer around the protected area. And so that allowed us to understand what the pressures were. We know what the pressures are on the wildlife. We know that it has to do with forest degradation, fragmentation, all these things. But we need to know what the exact issues are with the local communities, because they're the largely the ones that are causing those pressures on that remaining habitat. And so with that socioeconomic assessment, we're able to, prioritize what issues there are, or understand what issues there are in each of these communities, and then prioritize how we can best intervene to assist them, and decrease those pressures they're creating. And the people themselves are just, incredibly grateful and incredibly resilient. And they help to provide us with feedback on some of these programs, whether it's like alternative proteins or some of the enhanced agriculture, and effective solutions to, just increase the effectiveness of those programs, even, fivefold. And so that's been awesome. And then it's also just been great to be able to, so many people want to work with us. And so we've been able to greatly expand our teams through, them jumping at the opportunity to join our mixed brigade patrols, or learn to be a research technician, or help support our research efforts in these areas, and or even help to support our community garden work. So that, if people don't want to go into the forest and help us there, they can certainly help out in the communities, whether it's through education programs in the schools or community gardens, to help provide not just alternative proteins, but just, any sort of nutritious food to help supplement their diets in these areas, and provide a little bit more food security.
How much time do you spend in Madagascar in a given year? Are you there a good percentage of the time? Is it just you make a trip when you need to, or how often are you actually on site?
Yeah, currently I spend between 5 to 6 months out of the year in Madagascar. That has come down. Yeah, when I worked with San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, I was spending about 10 months out of the year in Madagascar. But I have a family of my
Wow.
own, a wife and two kids, and I I can't spend that amount of time there, that much amount of time there. So I'm about 5 to 6 months at the moment, and that's usually split between several trips. So I'm typically there for no longer than 2 months at a time.
What is it? I mean, what is the benefit of being on site versus doing maybe this research or what research you can remotely?
Well, yeah, it's really important for team building, and just being able to build those relationships with all the people that we work. With the exception of myself, our entire all of our teams on the ground, everyone is Malagasy. And so these are a lot of them are actually people that I've known for, well, a couple of them I've known for 20 years since that first trip I took.
Wow.
And then others I've known and worked with for nearly 10 years now. And so with those networks, we've continued with Wildlife Madagascar to kind of build that networking, that base, bringing students and others from the local universities. And so we've continued to, build from the ground up. In building at each of these remote sites, we're training and working with those local communities, and it just helps for me to be there, but also to support and capacity build for those local team leaders, and then they can reach out with the local teams in these remote sites, because the local teams, they don't necessarily want to see me, or like, the villagers, they don't want to see me. They want to, I need to support our local Malagasy teams to make sure that they have what they need, but it still requires me to be around.
Sure. So you mentioned earlier that Madagascar, because of that endemism, that's kind of one of the distinctive things about its biodiversity. You said that was kind of makes it kind of a treasure trove as a scientist. Why is it so important as a scientist to study places like Madagascar that have this unique biodiversity?
Yeah, so it's critical basically because once those species are lost, they're gone forever. the wildlife and ecosystems, they're not just unique, they're irreplaceable on a global scale. Protecting wildlife isn't just about saving lemurs or rare plants, it's about preserving that complex web of life that supports everything from soil health to local livelihoods and even global climate regulation. So every species plays a role in those ecosystems, and losing one can really have a cascade effect. In Madagascar, if the fossa is to go extinct, if they're hunted out or they lose enough habitat, then there would be no regulation of certain lemurs and or other small mammals, and without that regulation, then they may wipe out certain tree species. And without lemurs, which are natural and excellent seed dispersers, then a lot of tree species, without being able to have their seeds pass through the guts of some of these lemurs, then some of those tree species may go extinct. And so it's just one thing after another. And so it's really important that we conserve it. And since the arrival of humans, Madagascar, it's hotly debated when humans actually arrived on Madagascar. It could have been, 35,000 years ago. It could have been, 10,000 years ago. But whenever that was that humans arrived, there have been several incredible species that have gone extinct since then, including the elephant bird, which was one of the largest birds ever. I think it might have actually been the largest bird. It stood 10 feet tall and weighed a ton or so. It was huge. And we still have remnants. I mean, you can find their bones there. You find the elephant bird egg, which I think is, equivalent to like 160 omelets. It's just massive. Makes an ostrich egg, look like nothing. There were lemurs. There were at least 17 species of lemur across, and 8 genera of lemurs that have gone extinct since the arrival of humans. And 2 of them were the size of gorillas.
Oh my gosh.
And so, and all of those that went extinct were larger than today's today's living lemurs. And so we want to be able to conserve that. We want to be able to conserve what we have so far, knowing that there's 112 taxa. I assume that with, advanced genomics and genetics, and the more that we inspire Malagasy scientists and other researchers to research in these remote forests, that we're probably going to find many more species new to science. And so we really want to be able to document these things before those habitats are gone and those wildlife disappear.
You've said earlier that you worked at San Diego Zoo. You're obviously coming to speak at the Tennessee Aquarium, where, as I said earlier, we have 3 different species of lemurs on exhibit in the Lemur Forest exhibit. What contribution do zoos and aquariums play to protecting lemurs and other wildlife in places like Madagascar? Why are we, and why is our existence important to pushing or moving the needle in terms of conservation of species in the wild in places like Madagascar?
Yeah, Tennessee Aquarium and other zoological institutions, they play such an important role in protecting wildlife and lemurs in the wild. They give people a chance to see these incredible animals up close, which helps to raise awareness and inspires support for conservation efforts. Many zoos and aquariums participate in breeding programs for endangered species, helping maintain genetic diversity and serving as a sort of insurance policy if wild populations continue to decline. And beyond that, these institutions often partner with organizations as well to help support field research, habitat restoration, community-based conservation projects. You had mentioned the Radiated Tortoise Safe program. And so that goes to support the Turtle Survival Alliance's efforts in Madagascar and conserving that species from illegal wildlife trafficking and habitat degradation and destruction. So for the Tennessee Aquarium, for the lemurs that you have, seeing a lemur there isn't just an encounter. It's a connection to a bigger story about saving species and protecting the forest that they call home, even if that's thousands of miles away in Madagascar.
So, as a reminder, the event that you'll be coming to speak at is on Tuesday, April 7th. So, if you have a last minute, you're listening to this at the last minute, you could still get tickets to come and listen to you speak. You'll also have copies of your book, Lemurs of Madagascar, on hand to sign and for sale. Can you tell us about what that book covers in terms of what topics are you covering, and what angle are you looking at Lemurs of Madagascar from in the book?
Yeah, so the Lemurs of Madagascar, it's kind of a it's a kind of a famous book within the Madagascar lemur world because it's a field guide essentially, and it covers all of the currently known lemur taxa and provides everything about their natural history, behavior, ecology. I mean, for everything that's known about those species, each species is in the book, and then also provides a general history of Madagascar, lemurs, conservation, and so, yeah, within the talk, I'll go over each of the lemur families and just share some stories of working with certain species, and then the other three quarters will really be about wildlife Madagascar and the work we're doing to conserve these species. The book itself, though, is just super important. So again, this is the fifth edition. I wasn't a co-author on the previous editions. This is my first time being involved on as a co-author. The book is really an inspiration for Malagasy early career researchers. So they can look through it, and others, international students, anyone can look through it and see, oh, this species, there's nothing known about its natural history or nothing known about its ecology. And so then that may inspire them to, conduct a master's project or a PhD project on that species. They could look at the map of certain lemur families and see that, oh, that large gray area, we don't know what species is there, and so maybe we need to collect biological samples from that area and from those forests, and find out if that's a new species to science, or if maybe there is an extension, a range extension for one of the species north or south or east or west. For just to provide kind of an example, there was a second edition for the book in 2006, and the first edition was written back in the early 90s. But since that second edition in 2006, there have been, I think, 17 species of sportive lemur discovered since then.
Wow.
And that's largely because of the book inspiring people to go and search these other forests. At the time of the first edition, we really didn't know anything about ii. We didn't know where they were. We knew that they were kind of in a couple small areas in the east. And since then, we've discovered that ii are actually found throughout the majority of Madagascar, and that they have a really wide distribution. It's just that they have a very low density, and they still are incredibly cryptic. We don't know a lot about them, but we know that their distribution is much, much larger than what we had known back in the early 90s. And so the book has been an inspiration in that regard.
And just to give people some insight, so the ii is a species of lemur. It's got a pretty distinctive shaped finger. Can you talk a little bit about what they look like and their behavior? Because they're nocturnal, aren't they?
They are nocturnal. They are the world's largest nocturnal primate. Some may say the cutest. Others might say they're the creepiest. So yeah, they're kind of, they have this black wiry hair and a little bit of gray and these large ears. They kind of look like a gremlin. They have these ever growing incisors on them. So when early researchers discovered them, they actually thought that it was a rodent. They didn't even think it was a primate. And so, yeah, they're very unusual, mostly solitary. They're large. They have this big bushy tail. And then, yeah, on their third digit is elongated. And what they'll do is they will um, they'll walk up and down a tree stem and they'll tap it, and it's kind of known as tympanic foraging, and they'll listen for certain vibrations to be repeated back to them, and so then they'll be able to find a like a not a hibernaculum, but they'll be able to identify where larvae are burrowed inside of tree bark and tree stems, and so then once they find one, they'll gnaw it out and then extract the larva with their long, creepy digit. Uh, and
So,
yeah, they're great. They actually fill, or it's thought that they fulfill the ecological niche of a woodpecker. So
woodpecker, yeah.
we don't have woodpeckers in Madagascar, and so they kind of fill that role.
So you say people are split on whether they're cute or gremlin like creepy. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
I think they're cute. I think they're really cute. You know, the Malagasy people would probably argue at the other end of the spectrum and say they're creepy. And in fact, many communities, you know, have these body or taboos about them, saying that they're actually an evil, they embody an evil spirit, and that if you see one, you have to kill it. Otherwise, great harm will come to your family or to your community. It's not everyone, though. That's just kind of like the generalization, and that's the story, this myth that exists. And so a lot of people say that that's what it is. But actually, when you talk with different communities around Madagascar, different ethnic groups, it's variable. These myths and narratives are all over the place. And sometimes people actually have a very deep respect for Ai and want to conserve them. And so it's a bit all over the place. But sure, I think most people in Western culture say they're just creepy. And maybe I'm the maybe I'm
An outlier.
one of the few, yeah, on the other side.
All right. Well, as we wrap up this conversation and this episode of the podcast Aquatic, Dr. Eppley, what projects do you have working on that you're particularly excited about, whether they're public facing or just research projects that you're interested in continuing to work on?
Yeah, I think our reforestation efforts I'm excited about. We're still wrapping up the end of our first year of that, but so far we've planted close to 40,000 trees across all three of our sites this year. And by next year, I'm hoping that it'll be 40,000 trees at each of those sites, so 120,000 total, and then we can continue to ramp that up. Um, I really love our secondary program. Excuse me, this is taking place in the Northeast. And so there's a tropical plant hopper bug, and some of my colleagues discovered that they were really easy to farm and that they're incredibly nutritious. They have a lot of minerals and vitamins, high in protein, and that actually one serving can take care of approximately 20% of the daily serving of protein that you need. And so we've been ramping up our training efforts, working with local communities to farm these bugs. And they live basically off of the aphids on pole bean plants. And so they're not harming any of your own crops. You can set up these farms around the pole bean plants, so you're receiving both a vegetable protein and an animal protein, which is great. And, you know, I get it. You know, when we show up and we're talking to locals about oh, we want to introduce bug farming to you. People are like, oh, great. You know, that's not exactly high on their list, but then they actually taste them and they taste like bacon. And so we actually call them bacon bugs. And that is, once they actually taste them, it's an effective sales component, basically. And so we get 100% buy-in from the communities that we work with. And that's actually spread naturally now to adjacent communities and further into the region. And so that's been really awesome to track that spread.
For more information about eating bugs, check out the entomophagy episode of the podcast Aquatic. I probably mispronounced that, but yeah, there's our second episode, or one of our first few episodes, was about the benefits of eating insects. So yeah, dig into that episode back in our archives, and you can learn more about that. How can people support Wildlife Madagascar's work? So the event on the 7th, some percentage of the proceeds from that event will be going to support Wildlife Madagascar. But is there a way that people listening to this could support it if they can't attend the event?
Sure. One way is by donating or becoming a member, and that directly helps to fund our conservation programs, reforestation, community initiatives. Like I said, 100% of the donations to our organization go to our on the ground efforts. So none of that is spent on anything here in the U.S. or abroad. It's everything is directly to our Malagasy teams and our on the ground efforts. Another way that you can help is by just spreading the word, following us on social media, sharing stories about lemurs in Madagascar, helping to raise awareness about the urgent need to protect these species. Yeah.
Well, and if you want to learn more about what Wildlife Madagascar is about, and some of the staff members like Dr. Eppley, you can go to their website, which is wildlifemadagascar.org. And for more information about the event on the 7th, you can go to our website, which is tnaqua.org / I believe it's calendar. And you can there you can get your tickets if the event has not already happened, or you can learn more about the other upcoming events here at the aquarium. And with that, Dr. Eppley, I guess I'll end by asking how people can keep up with you personally online if you post about the work that you're doing or the animals that you're seeing in Madagascar, or I guess if you have some that you're seeing up in Michigan or Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm in Minnesota now.
Yeah.
I guess, really the best way to keep up to date with me and my work and Wildlife Madagascar is really just by, following us on social media. So, you can see everything that we're doing on the ground. You can find our handle, Wildlife Madagascar, on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I don't know, even YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. We've been posting videos from our sites. And so you can even see an overview of 3 of our sites on there, which is amazing video. We regularly share photos and news about lemurs, forests, and the communities that we partner with. And we have a monthly blog, a monthly newsletter as well that you can sign up for. I think it's automatic if you become a member, but you can also sign up for the newsletter independently on our website, which is wildlifemadagascar.org. And everything that Wildlife Madagascar is doing is what I'm doing as well. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, Dr. Eppley, I'll go ahead and end this conversation with thanks for joining us. I know we had a little bit of trouble getting our schedules to align, partly because I dropped the ball, but I'm glad that we finally got a chance to connect and learn more about your work as a primatologist and the Chief Conservation Officer at Wildlife Madagascar. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Look forward to visiting on April 7th.
If you have an idea for a future episode of the podcast Aquatic, send that to me at podcast@tnaqua.org. While you're online, go ahead and write us a review or leave us a rating if you don't have the time to write a review. Both of those are free and easy ways to support the show, and they really do help with the algorithm and making sure that more people can hear stories like today's discussion with Dr. Tim Eppley and about Wildlife Madagascar and just the amazing wildlife in Madagascar. So in the meantime, until next time, remember that every drop matters.